Today, I'm going to tell you the story of how I came across a shipwrecked boat on a tiny tropical island in the Bahamas and rowed it over 280 miles to the USA through some of the most densely populated, shark-infested waters in the world. This journey took place with two friends and with very limited food and water on board. Now the plan was for it to take around 7 days and only stopping on islands if we really needed to. However, the weather had some other plans for us. As you'll see, it turned into quite the adventure. Now the story starts almost a year ago exactly to the day. It was February 2024 and I was just chilling in Ecuador preparing to climb Mount Chimborazo, a 6,200 meter mountain, and it was going to be my highest ever summit. And I got a call from my good friend Jack Jarvis and he says, "Adam, remember that boat I told you was floating across the middle of the Atlantic after it was abandoned off the Canary Islands of Africa and was just making its way across the ocean? Well, it's been spotted by a Disney cruise liner just off the Bahamas and I think it's going to land there. Do you fancy a rescue mission?" Obviously, what kind of proposal is that? Of course I'm going to say yes. So we got the plan in place and the boat fortunately washed up on a beach rather than any rocky shoreline, which meant it wasn't completely destroyed and was taken in by the local police on the island of North Eleuthera in the Bahamas. Jack and I planned to get out there and try and recover the boat. And that's how the story starts. Now, Jack is a world record holding ocean rower. That's how he came into contact with the owner of the boat, Chris, who made him aware that it was washing up on a Bahamian island. And a friend, a now friend who I hadn't met at the time, Brucey, has also rowed across the mid-Atlantic before, and he was very much up for the adventure as well. So we banded together. I finished up my expeditions in Ecuador, and then I flew to Miami almost on a whim. We had about 2 weeks notice before we made it happen. Stayed in a hostel overnight, got my gear together. I literally just stayed with hand luggage and very limited supplies, just had a backpack, stayed in Miami overnight for one night and then headed over to Eleuthera, at which point I was greeted by Jack and Brucey and met Brucey for the very first time. What a wild adventure this was going to shape out to be. I'm literally landing on this island with just a backpack, and my intention of getting back into the USA is by rowing over 280 miles with absolutely no idea the state of the boat, or even I've never rowed a boat before, if my body's capable of it, and how the following days were going to unfold. And the way that these guys operate, Jack and Brucey I'm talking about, is slightly different to the way I like to plan my trips. I'm very meticulous. I make sure I know where my next meal is coming from, how I'm getting from one place to another, and everything's organized so that I can't get caught out by anything. And as soon as I landed on Eleuthera, the options in order to get to where we were staying, it was $100 for a taxi to get down to the police station and the accommodation that we were staying in, which is obviously not ideal. You don't want to be spending $100 on a taxi on day one. And so already we started hitchhiking and asking for help, and Brucey and Jack turned up with a new friend, Michael, who ended up driving us down the island, and all of the people that we met, all the American expats that we met on Eleuthera, were super helpful in just getting us oriented and helping us out. And we didn't rent a car either for the same reason, cost cutting. So ended up hitchhiking everywhere we needed to go, which I thought was going to be a nightmare. I've never hitchhiked before, and it was a nightmare. At some points we had to wait for 10, 15, 20 minutes or longer in order to have a nice bystander take us along, but a few pickups trucks on different days took us between the police station, the port authority, to a point whereby we just stocked it up with supplies from the local supermarket because we didn't know exactly how long this row was going to take. So we got all of our drinking water on board in these gallon bottles, and then just had tinned food of the most disgusting tinned food that you can imagine, lasagna and spaghetti bolognese and meatballs and that kind of thing. Gave some serious indigestion after consuming that entirely for 2 days straight plus. So after dealing with some bureaucracy, getting the boat released from the police station, because obviously they've just come into possession of this boat and had to prove that it was going to the rightful owners, so we got possession of the boat, had to get some help from some burly men to get it on the back of a trailer and get it in the ocean, and then it was just dealing with the daunting prospect of having to row it over 280 nautical miles, having never rowed a boat before. And as I said at the very start of this video, I had no idea how much we'd be stopping. The plan was to row for 12 hours each per day, so 3 men 2 rowing positions. We were doing a shift pattern of mixing it up between 2 hours on, 2 hours off, and 3 hours on, 3 hours off. And that means, as you can imagine, only sleeping for a maximum of a 3-hour stint. And the time it takes you to get off the oars, sort yourself out, clean yourself up, get to sleep, wake up and prepare for the next shift, you only end up really getting 2.5 hours of sleep if you're lucky in any given stint. So very unfortunate circumstances. My first situation having to deal with seasickness as well. I was taking seasickness tablets to mitigate that. And yeah, sore hands, having to row for 12 hours a day. Had never spent any time on a rowing machine even. So I was very, very daunted by the prospect of what was going to happen to my body. But you put yourself in a situation like that, and that's the theme of my life over the last 2 or 3 years, is continually exposing myself to more difficult stimulus and getting stronger and stronger as a result. And so we got our nice send-off on a clean 9 a.m. from this beautiful island of Eleuthera with the locals that we'd met and made friends with. Really insane tropical backdrop. I'm blessed to have even just been to a destination like that. And there we were after just 20 minutes. I did the first rowing stint, and I did that first rowing stint, and I remember thinking to myself 20 minutes in, oh my God, I want to stop already. This is boring and tiring, and my back hurts and my hands hurt. And I had the prospect of obviously a week of this without resting. So very daunting initially as your body and your mind adapts to the situation that you've put yourself in. And that's literally the best way to deal with it. You've just got to realize that you're in that situation and relax and let your body settle into the task at hand. So getting used to that disgusting canned food, getting used to the limited sleep, and making your body so tired that it's forced to fall asleep under those rocky boat circumstances. Also, I was in the bow cabin as opposed to the stern and the front cabin. The bow cabin is like a coffin, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that. Your feet go under the hull in front of you, and you have nowhere to go, nowhere to turn. I like to sleep on my front on land, kind of hand on pillow, one hand on the side. That is impossible when you're a 6-foot man in a cabin like that, especially because you can feel the curvature of the boat on your front, and so you would end up in this kind of position if you try and sleep on your front. So it's either arms to the side, lying on your face, or just lying on your back and getting used to it. Yeah, not comfortable to say the least, and obviously no showering when you're on the boat as well. So got settled in for the night, did my first shift, pretty grim, got on with it, and we were headed towards the island of Nassau, which is the capital island and capital city of the Bahamas. And we were getting some assistance from Chris, who was our weather router, the owner of the boat, who came out and helped with the electronics, and he was informing us when we were in between having internet connection, what the winds were going to do and whether we would be able to row through them. Because on an ocean rowing boat, you can achieve around 2 knots, 3 knots, which is roughly 3 miles per hour under your own steam. And the wind force and also the currents and other above water factors cause you to travel either faster, way faster than 2 or 3 knots, or slower, way slower than 2 or 3 knots. So you never, with your human power, can completely overpower the elements, obviously. And so if we had extremely strong storms or winds pushing us in the wrong direction, that meant a lot of trouble. And so we had to make sure that we knew what the winds were doing and were tactical about hopping from island to island if we had to stop, because if the winds were too excessive, we would be wasting our time and our energy. So why do I tell you this? Because there was a storm coming. We had rowed for 24 hours straight into the next morning, and we knew that we still had another maybe 6 to 8 hours ahead of us before we touched land on Nassau, and the plan was to stop there in order to avoid these winds. And so we, sure enough, cruise our way along and get to the pontoon, and we knew that we were landing on the Royal Yacht Club and no one was expecting us. We were just turning up, expecting to moor and see what happens. So we walk along the pontoon, and already this is my first experience of sea legs, because when you are on the ocean rowing boat, you have to have 3 points of contact at all times. You cannot walk or stand, and you're obviously constantly subject to the movement of the ocean. So as soon as I got onto the pontoon, I realized, even though I've only been on the water for 36 hours, I actually can't walk. So relearning to walk took a good 20 minutes to half an hour. and we were actually invited into the Royal Yacht Club. They had a regatta of some sort, gave us sandwiches and beers free of charge, which was unbelievable. So we reacquainted ourselves with land life after 36 hours on sea, and had a telephone call with Chris, and it became clear that we had about a 36-hour weather window from right now until the storm was coming in and the winds would be pushing us unfavourably for a couple of days. And what that meant was, actually quite funny from mine and Brucey's perspective, but not from Jack's perspective because he got pretty upset. We worked out that, we had 36 hours before the storm came in, and there was another island that was about 12 hours away from us in rowing distance. And so, do the maths. We've got 24 hours to spare if we leave now before that storm comes in. So Brucey and I were like, yeah, let's, have some food, get some scran in, have a burger, and then get on the boat and push to get to this island where we didn't know what to expect there. It was called Fraser Hogg Key. We didn't know, if people were living there, if there was a resort there, if there was absolutely nothing there. It was an abandoned island. No one could really tell us. We just thought, let's land there. We've got enough provisions to get there. And if we have to camp out on a desert island for 2 days before we can go again, that's what we'll do. Jack got his neck is in a bit of a twist, and I think he just wanted to stay on Nassau maybe because of the casinos, maybe because of the parties. Who knows at this point? But when you're sleep deprived and hungry, it's difficult to make decisions, especially when there's different conflicts of interest. And so we decided to get some food in and then push off, because one of Jack's favourite expressions is make hay while the sun shines. And so that's what we realised we needed to do. We needed to push on and get to our next destination, because we were only 2 days in at this point. And so as the sun was about to set, we rode underneath the bridge that connects Paradise Island to the main island of Nassau, which was pretty cool. I'd stayed there. I'd been there actually 2 months prior on a trip to Paradise Island in the Bahamas, so it was strange being back and suffering instead of being on a beautiful resort of the Atlantis. So we rode through, and we actually got a slingshot out of the channel, the waterway, because the tide was going out, and it just threw us out at about 6 knots in the correct direction towards Fraser Hogg Key. And so we row into this very calm and tranquil sunset. Our hands are still a bit on fire and our entire bodies are on fire, but we've got to keep pressing on. And so the sun sets and we settle in for another night on the water. And this was the first time that, obviously it's our second consecutive night on the water now, this was the first time I remember waking up for my midnight shift, whether I was starting at midnight or 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. or whatever it was, obviously doing that 3 hours, that 3 hour of rowing to look forward to in the night. And I remember my entire posterior chain was absolutely on fire, all the way from my hamstrings to my glutes to my lower back to my traps, even my rear delts, of course, and my hands. Just everything was on fire, as the delayed onset muscle soreness was kicking in, and there's nothing you can do about it. And I had no idea that rowing actually activates so many muscles, even the hamstring when you recoil yourself back to your starting position, the quad as you push yourself away, obviously the entirety of the posterior chain because you're pulling on the oars, and even a bit of chest and front delt, because when you reset the oars you're doing a bit of a pushing movement. So it's actually a bit of a full body exercise to some extent. So the entire body was on fire. We make it through the night, and we know that we're going to land on Fraser Hogg Key with absolutely no understanding of what to expect there. And so as the sun rises, we are all pretty tired and depleted and looking forward to having a little pit stop on land, because we don't know the severity of this storm. We don't know if we'll have internet connection to check the severity of the storm when we get there. And so we see this small pontoon that looks like it is abandoned and that our boat is going to get crushed into the rocks if we put it there. And then we see another pontoon that looks a bit more habitable slightly further down, but there's absolutely no infrastructure on this island, no houses that we can see yet, just these sticking out jetties. And so we head to this second pontoon, and there's an elderly man and a in late 30s, early 40s aged man standing on the end of the pontoon, and they're like, what the hell is going on? Why these 3 guys rowing in here with no engine? Has their engine broken? What's going on with their boat? Why are they here? Why are they on this remote island? And they were American men as well. I'll tell you what they were doing there very soon. So we turn up and we say, please, can we just put our boat here for a minute while we establish our next steps? And they said, yeah, no problem. Put the boat there. They tried to suss us out, see if we were a threat, and it quickly turned out, well, what we were doing and the fact we weren't a threat. And they ushered us off the boat onto the pontoon and then up towards their house. They actually had a house hidden behind the shrubbery behind the pontoon. And so it's about 8-9 a.m. on a random day. Can't remember what day of the week it would have been. And we get ushered into the house, and there's the two gentlemen that I just mentioned, their two wives, and then the two young daughters of the father. And they are all sitting around having breakfast, and we sit down there and we're offered coffee and bagels, and we don't want to intrude or take any of their food, obviously, but they were very generous with the coffee, and gave us all a bagel or half a bagel each. We explained how we have rations on the boat, and we were like, what's the situation with this island? Can we go, we'll just go to the shop, we'll pay you back for the food type thing. And they were like, oh no, there's no shops here. We're the only inhabitants on this island, and we were like, oh my god, where are we? So it turns out there was a small resort on the north of the island, but it's very well protected, and you can't get in or out of it, and you can only fly in or out of the resort. And there used to be some people that lived on the island. There were some houses still there, but no one lived in them, just this family. So there were no shops to buy anything, nowhere to get fresh water, except for the water tank that they have their reserves from drinking water that they keep there. And we managed to have Wi-Fi because they have Wi-Fi at the house, and so we called Chris and looked at the weather and saw that we were due a storm for the next 48 hours, which was actually great news because we've obviously found ourselves on this beautiful tropical island with absolutely zero tourists and just this one family who have welcomed us in. I was secretly very happy because my hands were so swollen and inflamed and just like could barely straighten them. They were literally on fire, is the best way to describe it. If you've ever had extreme muscle soreness, you'll know what I mean. So I just sat there just like keeping them cold, stretching them out as we were eating in the morning, and was very happy to get the respite for my body and recover on land. And we thought, let's make the most of it. So what we did next was explored these two incredible beaches that were only a 15-20 minute walk away from where the house was. And one side was a beautiful sandbar with extreme shallow water and just insane scenery, the way that the light reflected off the shallow water. And the other side was a beautiful beach with a cove, insane water, insane sand, and just no one there as well. It was a real blessing to be able to experience that place. Now you must be thinking that weather doesn't look very storm-like, Adam. You're right, it wasn't, but the wind was picking up, and by the time the following day came around, it was extremely strong winds, and it rained overnight. And yeah, we just settled in, spent a bit of time with the family, and also they quickly realised that we weren't able to continue to eat their food resources, but they didn't want us to just eat our rations and burn through our rations from the boat while we were there. So we were able to drink water from their water tank, and we actually had one shower as well because there was a neighbour's water tank that we nicked some water from and had a bit of a freshwater shower, which was nice. But like I said, the only way to get in and out of that island is to fly in, and so they fly in very limited carbohydrates and dried food for themselves, and they were expats, but they were only staying for a couple of weeks at a time rather than living there. So they had their carbohydrates and their supplies, and all of their protein came from the ocean, and so they spearfish and fish for their food. And so we were invited / told that if we wanted to eat any fresh protein, go out and spearfish for it. So the grandfather took us out on his little boat, and I had my first spearfishing experience, and over the course of that day and the next day ended up catching maybe 2 fish and 2 lobsters. The lobsters hadn't been fished for before. I'm not a very good spearfisher, but because they hadn't been fished for, they didn't know that I was a predator, and so I just managed to get it straight through the skull and catch them fairly easily without them running away. So that was a successful endeavour, and then learnt how to from scratch prepare that lobster for dinner. So we sit around the table with the entire family, prepare it like with the food we've just prepared. Then we made like spaghetti and like a sauce, and then all of the fish that we'd made, and then their family friends in a catamaran, the daughter of the grandfather, I believe it was, actually turns up to the island because they're on a sailing trip with their family. So this huge catamaran that had maybe 4 bedrooms, 4 double beds in each corner, like an oven, a kitchen, amazing supplies on board, and this huge family, about 8 people, pour into this house. All of a sudden, this deserted island has 1 living room and kitchen that has 20 people in it, and they were like, who are these guys? And we were all a bit confused about what was going on. We all sit around the table, explain the story, have a beer, and explain what's going on, and they say, well guys, that's an amazing story, dinner's on us tomorrow. So They invite us onto the Catamaran the following day, and we still have 24 hours, 36 hours before this storm is going to pass, so we have a bit more time. So we wake up the next morning and do a bit more spearfishing, but spend the day on the Catamaran. And so they take us out to this creek where there's loads of turtle sightings. So we go up on this rib over to this creek and look at all the turtles as they're jetting past our little rib, and also see a tiger shark with its dorsal fin that had been cut off. As I mentioned at the start, very shark infested waters here, but we hadn't seen anything as such to this point except for this tiger shark with the cut off dorsal. Worth mentioning as well that when I was on Paradise Island 2 months prior, that's when I dived with Caribbean reef sharks. There were absolutely hundreds of them, and it's very densely populated around all that water. So just because we couldn't see them doesn't mean they weren't there. Hundreds of Caribbean reef sharks, thousands I'm sure, in that area. And then this tiger shark, which can be pretty scary if they want to be. So that was my first time up close, just looking at it from the rib and putting the camera underwater, not putting my face underwater. So that was awesome. Did a bit more spearfishing, caught another fish, hung out with the family, and had our final night there before saying goodbye to this. It was like they were our extended family all of a sudden, because we'd spent 48 hours together and got to know each other very well. They were extremely kind to us with the things that they shared with us. They allowed us to sleep on their floor as well instead of sleeping on the boat, of course, which was amazing. And then we had to leave 8 a.m, kind of 48 hours after when we first arrived. So we said our goodbyes, got a picture all together, and then pushed off for our next stint, which was over 100 miles this one, and we had to make it to at least to Bimini Islands. Now the Bimini Islands are a famous party destination in the Bahamas, and they're also one of the best shark diving islands in the world. Again, more sharks. So we're taking this journey over, and we leave at 8 a.m. As the wind starts to push gently in our direction away and the storm has passed. We start to row our way over to Bimini, and we've had our time to recover our bodies. Everything was starting to feel slightly better. And it's worth noting at this point that it's actually difficult for me, telling this story a year on, to remember the pain and discomfort that comes along with rowing for 12 hours a day and having a broken sleep pattern, especially across after just having 2 days on land with nice sleep and with nice food. So it's difficult for me to recall the exact feeling and emotion when you are feeling a bit nauseous and having to row and back in the grind of it, but that's the thing that our mind does in extreme survival situations. It tricks ourselves into thinking that it wasn't as bad as it was, so that, as a coping mechanism. And as I get to the end of the story, and you probably are aware of what challenge I'm taking on very soon, the reason that I tell you that will become more and more apparent. So we row for a full day, a full night, and then another day, again 36 hours, in order to get to this harbour. And we know we're headed to I think it was called the Royal Harbour on South Bimini Island, and we rowed to the Royal Harbour and we think, it's going to be like the Royal Yacht Club that we found at Nassau. So we were expecting sandwiches and beers and the rest of it. We thought it would be very densely populated and we were going to have a good time and be let straight on. So we end up getting to land at about 3 p.m. The following day, and there's just this abandoned pontoon with shipwrecks underneath the water around the pontoon. It looked like it was absolutely storm destroyed, and we were thinking, oh my gosh, like there's absolutely zero boats here, zero sign of life, nowhere safe for us to tie the boat. What should we do? But our priority was just get on land and make a plan. So we find a way in deep enough water to tie up both ends of the boat so that it wouldn't clatter into the pontoon. We tie up both sides with enough tension so that it doesn't bang into the pontoon, and enough slack that it has enough ability to move up and down with the tides. Get off the boat, and then are like, okay, what's the plan here? What are we going to do? Again, the reason that we stopped is because there was an even bigger storm coming in. So we found out with Wi-Fi that this storm had just passed, and we had a day to make it, or 2 days, 2.5 days in order to make it to Bimini. So we obviously took that 36-hour journey and got there. And then the weather was going to change again very soon. So we were a bit worried about leaving the boat on that pontoon, but we just wanted to establish our bearings. So we left the boat there, and then we took our valuables and started walking. And we're walking through South Bimini. Now, everyone watching this, I'm pretty sure none of you will have been to South Bimini before, because all of the tourists go to North Bimini when they go to Bimini. So we're walking through South Bimini, and it's difficult for me to describe, but you can see it in these images. there are these beautiful, like, multi-$100,000 houses with boats, a marina, like incredible houses, like just row upon row upon row. It's like the marina from GTA 5 or from LA, and everything looks perfect and well maintained. However, it is a ghost town. It's like everyone just left yesterday. It was extremely confusing. So we're walking through all these houses. There's clearly no inhabitants, no working cars, just these boats moored up, and then also these houses that look fairly well maintained. And then there was this pine forest with a dirt track through the middle, and this was the direction towards North Bimini. So we thought, well, we've just got to keep walking and keep finding our bearings till we find a person and find out what's going on, if we can put the boat somewhere else. So we walked through this pine forest, huge pine trees either side, just along this dirt track, all in very high spirits. I think we had internet connection at this point, and so we found that there was hopefully a restaurant further down, so we were heading down towards that. The morale was good. I remember us cracking some jokes. We were headed to a restaurant called the Petite Conque, and seemed fairly confident that we were going to get some food. So we're walking along, very hungry at this point actually as well, because we depleted after a couple of days rowing and didn't want to burn through the supplies. So I remember us all being a bit on the ravenous side. And as we make it halfway down this pinewood walk, there's this golf cart rolling up, and we're like, oh great, civilization, who is this? This golf cart rolls up, and there's a lady in there named Cheryl, and so we flag her down, and Cheryl stops, and very funny moment, the way that all of us approached interactions with different people became pretty apparent. So Jack was trying to establish that Cheryl knew what we were doing, why we were there, and asking for some information. And all of a sudden, Brucey just comes in and says, "Why is it so deserted here? Can we sleep on your floor?" Like, just asking for what we needed instantly, which was funny. I've probably not done that service in the way that it came about, but we were trying to take it nice and gentle and see what Cheryl was about, and Brucey was in with the hard-hitting questions of what's going on, why is no one here, can we stay with you? Cheryl gives us a bit of the rundown of how it's a holiday location, and so lots of people do stay and live there. However, they're not there at the moment because it was slightly out of season or whatever. And so she explained how, she's looking after a house. There was a restaurant down that way. We told her where we left the boat. She said, no, you can't leave it there. And very, very kindly, she allowed us to move our boat into the marina where the house that she was looking after had space for a boat, and obviously then it wasn't subject to the storm that was coming in a few hours' time. And so at this point it was like 5 p.m. ish. We were about to lose the sun, and we were thinking, we don't want to leave the boat there overnight. Let's just get it out of the way now. So Cheryl kindly drives us back over to the boat, and we have to row it all the way around into the marina. I say all the way around, like we haven't just rowed hundreds of miles, but we were tired and we didn't want to row, so we row it round into the marina. Moor it up, and Brucey's like, oh, is this a house available? Can we sleep in it? And sure enough, there was a games room with some sun lounges, so we just put our sleeping bags on the sun lounges and slept on the floor on our roll mats and stuff, and we're able to sleep in this outhouse while the storm passed. And I think Cheryl was pretty happy just to have a bit of excitement and company and these random guys that just turned up on the island. So at least we had some shelter to sleep in, not on the boat. The boat was safe, and now it was a case of establishing how long this storm was going to take before we could make our final push over to the USA, the final 80 or so nautical miles. So I'll reiterate, we still hadn't eaten much at this point, and it was now 7-ish p.m. after we'd sorted out the boat, and so Cheryl said she would take us down to a place called, what was the name of that restaurant? The Thirsty Turtle. So we go down to the saloon, the Thirsty Turtle, in the golf car, and get some burgers in. And the owner and chef was called Mad Dog, so it's going to be a good burger when the guy prepping it's called Mad Dog. And this is one of the best, if not the best burger I've ever had in my life. I don't know what he did to that burger, but it worked a treat. We had a couple of beers, a Calic or Click, I think they're called, the beer in the Bahamas, especially on that island. Had a couple of them, had a burger each. And then established that it was going to be 4 days that we were stuck on the island before we could move. So what initially we thought was going to be, 7 days straight of rowing with no fun and just gritting it out and rowing for 12 hours a day every day for 7 days, turned into the fact that we were now stuck on this island for 4 days because there was a storm and it was moving all in the wrong direction before we could catch. Before it turned into neutral weather again, and we could catch the Gulf Stream to slingshot us into into Miami and Palm Beach, where we were intending to land. And Brucey famously said, "I don't think we'll survive this, having this much time on this island." And I didn't know him very well at the time. And I was like, "What do you mean we won't survive? We'll just have a few beers, we'll have some fun. That's it. What do you mean we won't survive?" Turns out he's a dangerous man when you give him an unlimited supply of alcohol. See if there's any women on the island, because we've got some time to burn. we got 4 days. It's actually quite a long time. We got this Friday. Yeah, we got Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. Wait, it's Thursday.
Yeah.
No, we got Friday, Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday, Sunday night.
Oh my god. I don't think we might survive, mate.
So we're going to the Thirsty Turtle now. The boys have showered and I'm quite jealous. I want to just wash my face, but we don't know what's going to be in there. It could just be a load of 50-year-old American men.
So fine by me.
Then yeah, it's fine for you and Jack, but I'm out of the question. The chaos ensued. We kept it fairly civil initially, and I'm trying to work out which stories to tell and which stories not to tell in this video as I go along. But we do all our touristy stuff first and go to like the oldest house on the island, the beach, which wasn't especially flattering because of the storm.
Got an 18-pound cannon from.
Could ask you the same question, Brucey. And bear in mind that anytime we go to do anything, we have to go to North Bimini rather than South Bimini. So we catch a ferry, which costs maybe a couple of dollars each way, but you can't. Obviously, you can't cross it without a ferry. You can't cross that land between the 2 Bimini Islands, and so you have to go at a reasonable hour in the hours of daylight. And yeah, it was a bit of a walk. Obviously, we have to walk all the way to the ferry, and then we catch a cab or hitchhike, etc. Normally, like a golf car taxi, we would get when we're on North Bimini. So we established, how on earth are we going to pass this much time on the Bimini Islands and what can we do here? And I knew as a diver that it was one of the best places to dive with hammerhead sharks in the world. I just finished diving with scalloped hammerhead sharks in the... Scalloped or scalloped? Scalloped hammerhead sharks in the Galapagos Islands inside an underwater dormant volcano, which was sick. And they're cool. They're very, very cool sharks. Probably my favorite, actually, a scalloped hammerhead. And I don't even know how to say it. And they are like 6-ish foot long. Don't quote me on that. Maybe 8 foot long, and pretty slender, athletic, and aggressive looking sharks. But on Bimini, they have great hammerheads. As you can imagine, they're bigger than the scalloped hammerheads. And there's an opportunity to dive with them there, but it's very expensive. It's a couple of $100, and you do. It's a feeding dive, so you just go down, sit there, watch them feed, and they swim all around you, and then you leave again. And Cheryl took us to the bar where the shark company owner hangs out, and so we went over. I'll put the name of the company here. We went over and kind of schmoozed him up a little bit, told him our story, and said we were interested in some shark diving. And he said, "You know what, guys, that's a cool story. You can dive for free." So we were like, yes, things are looking up. So we had to make sure that the weather was appropriate when we wanted to go on our dive. We planned it in for a couple of days' time. And ended up doing shark diving with great hammerhead sharks on Bimini, which was like a lifelong thing for me, and I never knew when I was going to make it happen, so it was amazing to be able to make it happen as randomly as part of this time that we were stuck on the water. So Jack and I did that because Jack got certified as a diver in the army as well. Safe to say we had some fun on that island. I can't really tell all of the stories there for off camera, but we got invited onto a nice boat for a fish dinner at one point, and it was fun. Went into the Hilton Casino and lost at blackjack, but that is not... I'm now retired from blackjack, and that's not the reason. The trip to Vegas in October last year is the reason I'm now retired from blackjack, and I'll tell that story another time at some point. We met some very interesting characters that I fear to tell the story of for my own safety. So again, I'll keep that one offline. But yeah, we had some fun. Stormy weather. And Jack and I got a bit cabin fever. It's funny, the time we got the most cabin fever was when we were not on the boat. So we ended up doing EMOM, every minute on the minute, push-ups, 10 push-ups for 40 minutes. And I thought that would be extremely difficult, doing 400 push-ups in 40 minutes, but it turned out to be way more manageable than I expected. And that's become my new way of banging out loads of push-ups. Did I say pull-ups? Push-ups. If I don't have access to a gym and I want to get some push work in quickly. So I often did that when I was in Seville, and I didn't go to the gym. I ended up just doing 500 push-ups in 50 minutes. So that's a good tactic for you. Depending on how strong you are, you could just do 100 push-ups in 10 minutes or break it down a different way. But anyway, so we needed to exert ourselves despite the fact that we'd just been rowing for days on end. And then we were faced with the prospect as the wind changed. We said goodbye to all of our new friends on the island, said goodbye and thank you to Cheryl, and we faced the prospect of our final push along the Gulf Stream and against the Gulf Stream, essentially, because we were trying to make it due west towards Miami, and we had an inlet waiting for us with a trailer to pick us up at Palm Beach, which is just north of Miami. We leave at about 3 p.m. on that final day, and we're rowing due west and just getting blown north constantly, and we're just trying to hold a 270-degree bearing. We row through the night, through the next morning, and it ends up being like 4 or something p.m. the following day by the time we get to the inlet. Rewind, actually, because I'm going to tell you a story of that night, that final night. You may know or you may not know that this boat obviously has done a bit of ocean rowing before, and it was abandoned off the Canary Islands, as I told you at the start of this video. And also, you know, we're saving it, returning it to the USA, but it's from Southampton, England. And so Jack and Brucey were very much aligned in the fact that we were saving this boat in order to row it back to Southampton next year. And as was I was always part of that crew and part of that idea. But I remember in that final night after Bimini, when I was waking up for my 2 a.m. shift or my 4 a.m. shift or whatever it was, and it just, you know, and you get that ringing headache and you feel sick and you feel like you'd rather be anywhere else when you have to wake up in the middle of the night faced by the idea of rowing for 3 hours straight with everything hurting and then having to sleep again on a boat. Waking up on land is actually my least favorite part of any given day, and the fact that during ocean rowing you have to wake up 4 to 6 times a day because you have to sleep in those increments means that I'm frequently confronted with my least favorite part of being alive, which is returning to consciousness in a morning. I don't hate, like, I feel alright after a well-rested night, but you know that moment when you got to wake up early and you're like, oh my god, I've got stuff to do. Anyway, so in an ocean row you certainly have plenty of stuff to do because you've got to row immediately. Anyway, so in that final night, I wake up and I'm thinking to myself, oh, I know you've agreed to row across the North Atlantic next summer to return it from New York to England, but this sucks. Just remember how much pain you're in right now and how like uncomfortable this is. There's no point in taking on this amount of suffering again. Don't do it. I know you're going to get to land and you're going to feel better, and you're going to forget about how much pain you're in and how uncomfortable it is. As soon as you get to land, you'll forget about it and then you'll agree to row it. So just remember this moment and then just tell them that you're not going to do it. I told Jack that story fairly recently after we were fully pot committed. And how did we get pot committed from that situation? What happened was we returned it to Palm Beach. The boat then was stored in Palm Beach for a little while, in Stewart actually, in Florida. And the dust was settling on that expedition before we were planning to row across the Atlantic this summer. And so I sat on the idea for a couple of days while I was in Miami with a friend and had a few drinks and some sushi, and we were talking over the idea, and he was like, yeah, you got to do it, haven't you? I was like, yeah, I probably do have to do it. And I had a few beers and I agreed with him that I was going to do it. The North Atlantic crossing, that is. But I kept it to myself. And then a couple of weeks later, I was in Peru, deciding, am I going to do it? Am I not going to do it? Wrestled with the idea. And obviously the problem is, as I was wrestling with the idea, the pain of the previous expedition was fading and fading and fading. So as I was tending towards making a decision, I was constantly forgetting about how it actually feels to row across an ocean, or a sea in my case, not even an ocean. And you've got to consider short-term pain but also long-term legacy when you make decisions like this. Long story short, as you may be aware, or long story long actually, I've been waffling for a while, I'm going to be rowing across the North Atlantic with Jack and Brucey and one other friend, Nutty, in 7 weeks from the day that I'm filming this video. And yeah, it's an exciting prospect, and it just shows that you can lie to yourself in those moments, and pain quickly fades when you're in a more comfortable situation. And I feel like my life, or the masculine essence in general perhaps, is the constant ebb and flow between seeking out comfort and fulfilling your goals in order to get into a more comfortable position, and then being exceedingly comfortable and having to chase adversity in order to feel satisfied, and force yourself into discomfort again, and you're constantly meandering between the two. And so right now I'm in the UK after a period of extensive comfort. I've actually quite enjoyed my life over the last 8 or so months, and I'm about to head into a period where I'm very much not going to enjoy it, both across the Atlantic and then other future challenges as well. But anyway, I digress. So we are cruising along the Gulf Stream, and it's the next day at about 4 p.m. We are about to pull it into an inlet, and again, the only other time that we've argued, Jack, Brucey and I, this time it was Jack and Brucey that argued, was over a decision of where the inlet was and whether we had to pull in before a certain landmark or after a certain landmark, and a combination of stubbornness, sleep deprivation and difference of opinion can make arguments. And it's amazing because we're all pulling in the same direction, we're all trying to achieve the same thing, but you can have a difference of opinion, and yeah, that's the only time that the arguments really exist in those scenarios, is when you're trying to find a common solution to a goal that you both want to seek out the same solution to. But when you're in such a high stress situation and a high pressure environment, when you are, low on food, low on sleep and stressed, it can breed difficult conversations. So anyway, it didn't really matter in that scenario. We pulled into the relevant inlet, pulled it in, got the boat onto a trailer, drove it we got driven to Stewart, Florida, had a KFC actually, which was delightful. And I had a Monster because I was extremely tired at that point. And then we had a bit of fun in Miami before I flew down to Peru. And then I've already told you how the next month kind of ensued after that, making the decision to fully commit. And so what happens now is we've been planning. It's now April 2025 as I record this video. So it's a year on or 13 months on from when that mission took place. And we've spent the last year doing a lot of fundraising. We've had to raise £40,000. Mainly from companies in order to fund the expedition. We've obviously already got the boat and the charter costs covered, but we've had electronics and equipment and clothes and food that we've had to pay for, which has been stressful and labor intensive. I forgot the word for intensive there. I'm going to leave that in. And we are looking to raise £50,000 for Head Up, the veterans' mental health charity, over the course of our expedition. It's 3,500 miles as opposed to the 280 miles that we rode in this story that I just told you. We're rowing 3,500 miles from Manhattan, New York, past the Statue of Liberty and out of the Hudson River into the North Atlantic Ocean, across the route that the Titanic could not finish, but we're doing it in the opposite direction, up past Canada, due east, and then towards the UK. And if we set the world record, which is just over 43 days, so we're looking to do it in around 43 and a half days or less, that will put us in England just before the 1st of August, end of July, 1st of August, first week of August. And essentially the record is not down to us, because we're going to do everything we can to row as effectively and as efficiently as possible and make sure we leave nothing on the table. But it's down to the weather system. So we could get rather fortunate with wind, we could get rather unfortunate. The likelihood is we get a combination of good luck and bad luck, and it depends how severe and how significant the storms that we inevitably get stuck in are as we make our way across, as to whether we can achieve the world record for the crossing. A crossing that has been done only 40 times in human history, which is wild to think. We're taking on a challenge so significant. And why I say it's so significant is because if you think in terms of context and numbers, I think it's 7,200-ish people have climbed to the summit of Mount Everest, whereas less than 40 expeditions have been successful to cross the North Atlantic, and that is from west to east across the Atlantic. There's been 600-ish successful expeditions from east to west, from the Canary Islands or from Europe to the Caribbean. However, colder conditions and rougher seas make the North Atlantic more treacherous, and the best way that I'm coping with the fact that I'm about to take this on with my three friends is just ignoring all of the negative suffering that's about to come, because there's nothing I can do about it now. So thank you for reliving that memory. I enjoyed unpacking that. I've got so many stories from my 2.5-3 years of travel since I quit my job to do this full-time and to coach people in physical fitness full-time, and I intend to tell all of them, because you've seen I've vlogged and recorded things as I've gone on this channel. However, there are so many untold stories, things that I didn't film, the crazier stories and the behind the scenes, and also the parts of the expeditions that you've seen that are untold, and I intend to reflect on all of those as we continue to make more memories and take on more challenges as well. So more story times like this to come, and I enjoy sitting down and just having a chat as well. So yeah, this has been fun. And if you want to see the raw videos that I put together, obviously I've put them all over the top of this video so you can relive it with me a year on, but it's about an hour and 20 minutes of footage in total that I released at the time. There's 5 episodes of this Bahamas rescue mission, and so you can see everything as it happened in those videos as well. I'll link them in the description and at the end of this one. So thank you for reliving this with me. As I said, I'm trying to think what the next adventure's going to be. I'm actually flying to Maryland in the USA in 4 days from right now, and the intention is to paint anti-foul on the outside of the boat, because the boat is currently in Maryland. We got it trailered from Florida up to Maryland. Paint anti-foul, repaint the cabins on the inside because they had crusty white paint in them when we rode in the Bahamas. We've got to change the batteries, change the electronics, put a Starlink on there so that we can upload videos and contact you guys when we are rowing across the Atlantic, and then also fill the boat and fill the ballast with various supplies and reserve supplies that we've already acquired, and then we push off from New York in about 7 weeks time. So I'll probably take you with me for some of that in Maryland. Thank you for being here, appreciate you. Subscribe if you haven't already. I think most of you do subscribe, but if you haven't, get involved. It's going to be fun. We're just getting started. See you on the next adventure.
Oh, you want me to say that?
You have to.
Oh, I have to. Like and subscribe.
No, say it with conviction and
Please like and subscribe. Adam Radcliffe at YouTube,
.com.
Instagram, Facebook.